All right, we should be streaming now. Let me just check.
We'll roll the intro once we have one viewer.
Yeah. All right, there's no viewers waiting. There's no concurrent viewers. So it's just us. Welcome. This is the first podcast of Civboot in a long time. I have with me a guest, Skywit from our Discord channel. And we're just going to be discussing just some general ideas around Civboot, other projects similar to it, and the overarching question is the simplicity of technology, complexity in technology, and the alternatives. So, welcome, Skywit.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
I'm a technology guy. I'm a software engineer by trade. And I have spent a lot of time researching and thinking about how technology impacts society and why there's a drive for simplicity in technology in a lot of technology circles. What's the benefit of technology beyond the practical of maintainability and of understanding and projects that can address the need for simpler systems.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I asked Skywit to join me today was we had just kind of an offline, well, I call it offline, a non-recorded conversation uh, over Discord, and we just kind of wandered down a lot of paths. And I said, hey, I think this would be a great thing to talk about for the podcast. So here we are. So um, the first general question is, so we're kind of going to go back to the basics here. There are other episodes from many years ago about Civboot. We're going to start kind of from scratch here, which might be kind of a pun actually. It wasn't intentional. Um, what? So I don't know. Do you want to try and introduce the idea of what a self bootstrapping technology is first of all, and or what, or sorry, what does complexity in technology mean? Um, what is its value? What are its costs? And maybe some alternatives. Maybe we can start there. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
So, Civboot is a project which, right, you can talk way more knowledgeably about. But I would classify Civboot as one of a myriad of projects throughout, that have been developed over the past years that are trying to address this niche problem uh, of making systems that are similar and don't have huge amounts of complexity that no one can ever run. Uh, and I in a lot of circles in Linux and programming, a lot of people are of the mind that simple is better. Uh, Lots of reasons why simple is better. Practically, smaller code base means it's more maintainable. Um, Cleaner code, easier to read about, easier to change and edit. But I think there's a deeper need that needs to be addressed, which I think maybe subconsciously or aren't aware of the fact that they are thinking this way, which goes beyond the problem, and that is that systems are better for individuals and for small communities,
Yeah.
society in general.
Yeah. Simpler
Sense.
systems are
Uh,
better, generally better for specific individuals and small communities. I like that.
right, and I think that the one of the driving factors there is that human beings are not evolved to cope with this level of technological complexity that we have these days. Even 100 years ago, even the highest technology, a tractor or truck or an airplane, um, people who had a 2 year or 4 year in engineering could fix very nearly anything that they came across with enough time. Um, Nowadays, that is no longer the case. You cannot fix basically anything that's technology, because uh, everything has a computer in it, and computers are really the this magic bean that's grown this magic beanstalk of uh, unmaintainable, unfixable, ununderstandable, unknowable technology, which has infected all technologies now. Whereas in the past you could fix your own car, or in the past you could, fix your electronics or whatever. And that's no longer the case because now everything has a built-in computer.
Right,
Um,
and it more specifically, it has built-in computer chip, which has such small components that you couldn't hope to affect it through any means that you have possession of at your home, or even at basically any industrial scale. Really, hardly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, the One of the driving factors of that is that computers are super complicated, but also super cheap.
Right.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
If
I mean,
microcontrollers costed, $100, then they wouldn't be in everything. But because you can get, a batch of like 1,000 microcontrollers for like 10 cents, it makes sense that people would put these into things to make their products more appealing.
absolutely. And I mean, what we're in a nutshell, what you're seeing is Moore's law at work, um,
Right.
which is that there's been a doubling of transistors in any given unit area every 2 years, 1 to 2 years over the last, what's it been, 50 years that Moore's law has been in effect.
Yeah.
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 Right. And so, maybe before we talk about what alternatives exist and why simplicity is good, I think one of the areas that's often missed in this community, I've been kind of in this community in the perma computing and Dusk OS, and I've looked at Project Oberon, and a lot of the proponents of this kind of system or mindset, one of the things they never talk about is what is the value of this complexity, right? You know, it has these negatives, right? And I do agree there are negatives, but what is the value of complexity? So maybe we should talk about that briefly, and I'll just introduce it. I mean, so like the first things that I think of is I'm a software engineer. I work with hundreds of other software engineers in my building. I work with thousands of software engineers, and if you talk about the whole open source community, is kind of all working together, on this goal of improving technology or making it easier or more user friendly, or various like kind of both vague and specific goals like that, more performant. And I think that is fundamentally one of the main values of technology is that, I apologize, I'm going to have to tell my kids to be quiet. Guys, you need to be quieter. Okay, sorry about that. The
No
value of
problem. Go ahead.
technology. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying no problem. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, I mean, so the fundamental value of complexity is scale. Uh, you get what is it called? You can produce more units for cheaper. Um, you can also scale the number of engineers that work on a specific problem or a specific set of problems. You can have them work concurrently. Um, there is quite a bit of value from a business sense in complexity, which is why we see complexity continue to grow and grow and grow. Is it continues to provide more and more returns, um, and it's just that simple. You have anything you want to add there?
No, I think that's dead on. Um, I think we need to. Part of the problem, I think, is that because this transformation of Moore's law and this explosion of complexity has been so sudden, relatively, in like 2 generations, 50 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really ahistorical. At no other point in recorded history has something like this transformation occurred. I think we sort of have just walked through each step of this transformation without really thinking too critically about what the consequences would be, aside of
Right,
the obvious economic benefits.
right. And in fact, I think the general idea is improvement in technology good. Uh, that's it. Like, there's no other
Yeah,
thought. I
it's
mean,
it's pretty much that simple.
occasionally
It's like,
you get ideas like, oh, maybe nuclear technology had, some these externality negatives, these risks. Obviously, like, it killed millions of people in World War II, and it has a certain radiation risk. So there's like some ideas put there, but it's kind of vague and not very specific. But in general, the problem of complexity itself and how it'll affect humans hasn't really been addressed honestly until recently. I think people now are starting to realize, hey, if we're on our smartphones all the time, that's actually not good for us. So there's some like, and these algorithms that are affecting us are not necessarily good for us. So there's a little more interest in how technology is affecting each person. This isn't to say specifically complexity is not the focus, but I think complexity here is important because if it's a simpler technology, it's going to be less addicting. It's going to have less of these kind of problems that kind of come along with large scale technology. That's my viewpoint on some of that. Um,
I think that mostly is true. I have been other technologies that have been even more addicting than algorithms and stuff. Like heroin, opium, um, drugs. These are ancient technologies which we've sort of evolved, have evolved to cope with in certain ways um, over
yeah,
thousands of years. Uh,
yeah.
the technology one is different.
This isn't the first time humans have had to cope or deal with problems, for sure. Um, but
Right.
it is a new class of problems that we don't have any kind of systematic structures necessarily for dealing with easily. I think. I think that's. Um,
Yeah, and let's focus a little bit on specifically the computer, because when we talk about technology, we're mainly focused talking about is computer-based or computer-augmented technology.
yes.
Um, like the first jet planes were designed with drafting tables and pen and paper essentially.
Yeah.
That's technology, but I think computer augmented technology. And so let's talk a little bit about the specifics of well, before we get into the cons, which I think have to say about those, of course, are better for the economy. Things get cheaper, computation gets cheaper, which are good
Yeah.
things for the economy.
And these are the
Let's
pros.
talk about
These are
the
why
negative.
technology is pursued, or complexity in technology is
Yeah,
pursued. Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
right. Is there anything you'd want to add to the pros before we dive into how we're hating
No,
on technology?
no, except to just point out and maybe pivot from it, um, that we fully recognize these pros exist, and Civboot recognizes these pros, and I don't condemn any person or system or business that pursues these pros for the purposes of valid ends. Um, I just want to push back and say, hey, yes, these are pros in these contexts, but first of all, does an individual developer really need a million line or 10 million line compiler, and a million line code editor, and a 200,000 line version control system? Because that's what even the Linux kernel is 10 million lines, GCC is 10 million lines, Python is a million lines, Vim is like 800,000 lines. These are considered like kind of simpler things, and yet they have this huge complex code bloat. And that's not even getting into all the business software, Windows. I mean, you can go really deep on this mountain of complexity. And although complexity can serve people, like running your data center using Linux, and it having all these optimizations and things for your specific hardware, makes sense in a business standpoint. For you running on your system to have an understandable like web or technology stack so that you can compile and understand your code, is it all really necessary? Who is it actually serving? That's the kind of fundamental question. And I think for an individual that wants to try and understand and learn programming, having a simpler kernel would help more than the complexity. That's the assertion of Civboot, and I think that's the assertion of Project Overon as well, at least. And so we're going to get into discussing at least those two and comparing and contrasting them with the others. Is that a good pivot?
Yeah, I think you said something very poignant there. That you said, "Who does it serve?"
Right,
I think that's one of the key questions that we have to address: is who is this technology serving ultimately?
right,
Does it serve the economy? Does it serve big companies? Or does it serve people in society? And I
right,
think that's a key distinction. Um, is the economy, or like, the distinction is, are people do exist to serve the economy, or does the economy exist to serve people?
right. And
Does government exist to serve itself or for the people? Of what's the ultimate aim or the ultimate benefactor?
absolutely. And I think it's also important to point out here that these are large and complex systems. And all we're trying to do is offer a different perspective and a different approach. We're not trying to answer this question definitively in any way. This is a discussion. You know, it's not. It's just to provide different viewpoints and different perspectives here. Uh, so is that fair as well?
It's fair to say.
Yeah.
I don't think the solution exists, but I do think that one of the reasons there is no solution for ultra simple technology that you can use practically is um, the fact that this problem has yet to be defined in any concrete sense. So I think defining the problem is a step.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So I think. So with that, I think maybe let's pivot into what is the value of simpler systems? Well, so I guess what alternatives exist and what is the value of these alternatives? Do you want to introduce that?
Yeah. So the value of simplicity, like we said before, easier to understand the model of something, easier for maintainability, easier to modify.
Mhm.
But I think
Easier to
the
learn from, I
social
think.
benefit, right, the social benefit would be that simpler systems are easier to understand and they're easier to maintain for small groups of people. So, like if you have a phone, uh, there is not even a single component in there, one subcomponent or subsystem that one person could ever fully understand, given, their whole lifetime,
Yep.
10,000 hours of study.
Right.
It's all ultra complicated, ultra engineered, um, and the cons of that are significant, right? You have mass surveillance. No longer the company is or the government is, and the result of that is that you, as an individual and as small communities of people, lose your some of your freedom because you no longer have sovereignty over your own technology. Like, using these systems, you just by them exist, you're forfeiting some of your freedom, and I think
Right.
that's a huge negative. It's easy to imagine when we have sci-fi stories of brain chips and the mind and controlling you. But that reality is closer than people think. And there's other ways than, mind control, Neuralink chips, or something like that, that that kind of system of technology can be used in a very negative way to impact human freedom.
Right. And as we discussed before, or in a very positive way, right? It's the general problem that things that can be used positively can always be used, often be used negatively. Most technology is a double-edged sword. Um, but I think the main problem we're trying to point out here is not even having the choice to choose a simpler, understandable system. Maybe maybe for any specific individual, they want to make the trade-off and say, "Hey, I trust this large corporation to keep my data and my software safe," and so they want to choose to go with company X's phone. Gosh, I can't even say X now without meaning an actual company. I just realized that. I meant company whatever, company Y, I guess, is what I'll say. Um, Company Y's phone. Um, but if there was a real alternative to that, that solved the problems that they actually have, rather than um, offering them, this possibly, I think, highly more addictive technology. I think of phones as basically trying to have a cookie in your pocket when you're trying to lose weight. Um, it's something that affects people in their day-to-day life. It draws them to look online when maybe they should be experiencing their own life. And I think simpler technology that you can understand, it's less likely to add those kind of things in it without you being able to choose whether it is there or not. And to speak to the smaller community, it can give the community more choice about whether or not to add those kind of features, and to make choices about what they want their technology to do to serve them. There's a concept of conviviality here, of what does technology do to serve me, and how can I use my tools in a way that it does serve me, rather than me ending up serving my tools, which I feel like happens way too often in modern society.
Yeah, that's a good point. The sort of inversion of the way we think things should go, right? We think that we invent technology to help us, when really we are sort of, our reason for existing seems to be that we are maintaining, improving the technology for its own sake in many cases, or for the benefit of economic gains, which we never really see the benefit of as individuals.
Yeah, I mean, you see some of the benefits. I think like most things, it's complicated, but if
It is diminishing returns, I think.
yeah, well,
Um,
yeah, but you really see the cost as well, especially if like me, you just kind of end up spending a whole day watching uh, addicting videos on your phone, and that's not exactly how you wanted to spend your day, but that happens. And then even though you can kind of delete the apps, it's too easy to get them back on, and you don't have maybe the community structure that might help there. And it's easy to blame technology, it's easy to blame yourself, it's easy to blame all sorts of things. Uh, at the end of the day, I think you do have to hold yourself accountable, but um, there's things that society and the technology we have could make those things better and easier. And I think one of the points here is uh, some folks say, the government should step in and fix these things, which fair enough. I think there's arguments that could be made in that direction, but the other side of it, and the side that I personally take, is we have to be the ones who start trying to work on improving the situation. We have to make our technology understandable, bootstrappable, teachable, and controllable. And that's our responsibility if that's something we want, and something I want. So, and it's something I have control over because I happen to be a software engineer.
Point. Making it so that technology that's useful to individuals can be understood by an individual.
Hmm.
I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Because once a technology that you use in your daily life becomes, humanly impossible to understand on a human timescale by you, or you and your small group of, friends, uh, that's the point at which you lose your freedoms as an individual. Because at that point, the maker of that technology can put in all kinds of anti-features like spyware, evil algorithms. And even if you wanted to fix it, you couldn't go in there and change it because it's just too complicated or too locked down. I
Right.
think that's a good point.
Yeah. And depending on government to fix it, I think is at least a challenging proposition, because it's an evolving landscape, and government requires knowledge of the thing they're governing. It requires regulations which have side effects, um, and the issue of regulating thing, and who regulates the regulator and make sure things are working the way they are, is complicated, like many things. I don't think Civboot is going to attempt to solve or even really address any of these problems, but I just want to point out many of these problems are more complicated than most people are telling you. If they tell you it's simple, then they're selling you something, because it's not. Uh, and this gets to complexity in general, as one of the core problems, I think, in our society. We have a complex government, we have a complex technology stack, we have complex economy, complex global economy, and again, there's value in those complexities, but we should be looking at where we can simplify things, where we can localize things, where we can make things more understandable. For many reasons, one of them is just to have a seed that we can again grow more complexity on top of, but it's good to have something that you can restart on if you need to. Um, so
Right. I think
yeah, you want to finish
a
up
good
that
a
thought?
good sort of yeah, I think a good example of that might be that the U.S. power grid depends on German and Chinese made um, transformers and semiconductors. Uh, this was a big thing, I think, back in 2020, where all the 5G infrastructure was being, it was Huawei, and it was sort of a wake-up call for us in the United States, because 5G, without doing anything, without having an industry to make it, we would have been essentially surrendering uh, our technological sovereignty as a country to uh, to China, which is an adversary. Um,
Right.
so
And
having
yeah, go ahead.
and I would like to add one more thing there, and that's that technological complexity is sort of inevitable
Right.
in that in state
Sorry,
there is
you broke
a
up there.
natural and obvious
Do you want to
need
repeat the
for
last like 15
military
seconds?
technology. Oh, I broke up.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
so can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So what I was saying is that on the world stage, there is always going to be uh, a natural drive for increased technological complexity, because in one case, more advanced technology is more complicated to produce and maintain, and it gives some kind of advantage militarily, economically, which makes a country more powerful.
Hmm.
And it's just sort of like the real pick of the way things are. More power, more efficiency is more better on the world stage. So in a sense, we're never going to rid ourselves completely of technological complexity. Even these huge billion-dollar, billion lines of code, ultra complicated global supply chain based systems, they're here to stay, and they're here to stay forever. But I think that on the local scale, like the example of the CHIPS Act, the Chips and Science Act, or the 5G antennas that were having to be made in the United States as opposed to in China. Uh, and on a nation scale, there is certainly a need, not just because it's our preference or that we think it's better, but there's a very practical need for simpler technology that can be made locally, that is reproducible locally and understandable by your local economy.
Hmm.
Uh, because if you don't have that sort of local industrial base that's in every country, uh, you are essentially forfeiting your uh, some kind of freedom, some kind of sovereignty to other countries that do have the ability to produce that technology. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's all to say that there's a value add in simplicity. There's a value add in reproducibility. There's a value add in being able to produce things locally as well. Um, and I
yes,
think
so
that's
we that
important.
on the world stage, like that example of the antennas and stuff like that. That's pretty obvious. Right? If you told your dad, like your grandpa, should we use uh, stuff from China that could have spyware in it for all of our country's infrastructure, they'd say no. Obviously, it's a bad thing.
Right.
I think I think the main thing that we are focused on is bringing that argument down to a more local scale,
Yeah.
where we say, okay, it's obvious at the national scale. Like you don't want another country controlling your technological infrastructure, your country. That makes sense. It's not because it's just a disadvantage. On the local scale, we want to bring that level of independent local communities as well. So for systems like the things that you use on a day-to-day basis, a communications device like a phone
Hmm.
or a text editor,
Yep.
things that you do 90% of your work on, that you interact with 90% of the time. These sorts of technologies which you absolutely rely on should be able to be made more locally in a way that you and your local community, your city, your state uh, can exert, control over, uh, to give you that freedom of not forfeiting that to a humongous national organization or an international organization. Um, Having that power locally is super important for maintaining a level of human freedom in the technological dystopia which we are
Yeah,
imminently approaching if we're not there already.
yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of pivot here. I think this is a good spot, which is Civboot. The goal of Civboot is not just to talk about these things. I think it is important folks talk about it, and I think it's important we talk about it as an introduction here. Um, but it's to actually be able to do something about it. So the goal of Civboot specifically, just to really quickly summarize it for folks listening, is the fundamental question is what is the smallest factory? Think of like a building, a factory containing, you know, production equipment, 3D printers, a lathe, maybe, optical equipment for precision engineering measurements, as well as things like creating photoresist for producing CPUs. What is the smallest factory that you would need in order to produce both a computer chip and everything inside the Civboot? And that computer chip would have to be, powerful enough that it could power all of the things inside the Civboot, the 3D printer, and the CAD software, learning software, anything needed for a group of people to learn how to build that Civboot, basically, and store that data for people to learn how to build the Civboot. So that's the fundamental idea of a Civboot. That's where we're trying to work towards. Now that problem will require a huge amount of effort. I have no I know that it will require a huge amount of effort, but there's two things that make it a good goal. One is that it's incremental. If we even improve one aspect of making it simpler to get to a Civboot, for instance, if we prove that we can make a 1990s era, or sorry, a software operating system that could run a 1990s era computer chips and memory and could, do the CAD software, do the learning software, help self-educate students, obviously be a text editor and a version control and a forum and all of the things needed for that community as far as software goes. That would say that, okay, well, we just need to target a 1990s era computer chip. We don't need to target a 2020 computer chip. And that would be a huge deal, in my opinion, because it's going to be much easier to produce a 1990s computer chip. There's a lot of other effort that needs to happen on the hardware and precision engineering. I think computer chips need to be, for instance, thin film, not how we currently do it. We could go into details about that, and I think we should at a later time. But the basic goal of Civboot is let's work towards incrementally improving this. The second thing that makes it a good goal is it serves, it's concrete goal that you can point to, and you will know when you're done. It's a very difficult goal, but if it's achieved, you'll know you've achieved it. So those are the two things: it's incremental and it's achievable and it's measurable. Um, any comments on that you want to make, Skywit?
I do. So one thing that I think needs to be said is that because it is targeting a lower level of technology, like 1990s computer or 1980s computer or something like
Yeah.
that, um, it will never ever be competitive on the economic factor, right? A modern computer made on the most modern lithography fab is going to beat your chip day of the week to the sun and back.
The hardware
So
will.
I
The
think
software
the
might be competitive, uh, depending on
true
depending on the
a lot of
requirements.
right. I think this is something I think we totally agree on is that
Yeah.
the applications, the actual uses of computers that people use,
Yeah.
pretty much haven't changed since the 90s, right? Microsoft Word, email,
I mean,
all this could be done on essentially a microcontroller,
probably the
right?
main change is what we're doing now, which is communicating over video, streaming, and things like that. That's probably the main change since the 1990s. Which
That's fair.
It would be somewhat ironic for me to argue that that doesn't have certain benefits. Like I clearly think it does. I do
Well, you're
not think
definitely right on
video
that. It does
chatting
have
is
benefits.
necessary for a Civboot. I just think it's useful to grow the community before we have our first Civboot, our first Civboot University, other concepts like that. Um, I think it would be preferable to be in person,
Yeah.
but that's
Uh,
not where we currently are in this at this stage. And a lot of things in this day and age happen online, so that's where this is happening. So
that's true. And it's not to say that Civboot level tech couldn't achieve that, right? Like, back in the 80s, there was live broadcasting. There was, you could watch a TV interview live. You needed like a satellite truck and a big camera and stuff. But it's possible to create that level of technology, that functionality with older technology,
right,
less efficiently, but it is possible.
yeah,
So
higher
I think
cost,
the thing that we need to,
yeah, etc. But yes,
or the thing we need to like address here is that uh, since it's not going to make sense economically, there's going to need to be some kind of social governmental effort to make Civboot kind of technology uh, practical, or
hmm,
to create it in the first place.
right,
Things like the Citizen Science Act, I think, are an excellent example. It's not economical to make computer chips in the United States. However, for our national security, we have to.
right,
We just need to bring that argument down to a more local scale. So,
right.
what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think there's two main goals that could lead to the investment in Civboot technology, the desire to make things simpler. Maybe three, depending. I think there is a just a general economic improvement over simplicity. It doesn't always beat complexity. In fact, it often doesn't, but there is value in it. So just that helps a little bit. But the main two are education and exploration. Um, so on the education side, uh, having a simpler, understandable system that students could learn from would be highly valuable to education. I think it would be uh, actually a fundamental improvement to education for learning technology. And education is wasteful. I mean, if you've ever taught a kindergartner how to draw, they waste a lot of paper. You could consider it waste. But every time that they fail, you just throw away those pictures and you just give them a new paper and they try again. That waste is a part of the process of learning. And so there's less concern about having a less efficient, wasteful process if it's teaching people while it's happening. The second incentive, I think, is if we ever want to become like a multiplanetary civilization, we're going to want to be able to produce technology in situ on Mars or on asteroids or similar like that. Having technology, having a core kernel of technology that the community can produce for themselves on those systems, on those planets, even without help from Earth, I think is going to be an absolutely essential thing. And so that I think that could push technology forward, similar to how solar energy was produced solely for satellites. That was the first time that solar energy was ever created. It was extremely expensive, but they needed a way to produce energy in space. And you can't burn coal in space. Even nuclear can have problems, especially when you talk about safety of launching it. And so they developed solar technology for that purpose specifically. I think that is a possible driver of it. And then the third one, I guess, is the one you pointed out, which is generally, I think there's a desire to bring production in-house. And what better kernel for that would there be than a Civboot? If you could start with a Civboot and maybe increase the complexity to a point where it fulfilled the need of your local government or national government, but it was still simple enough that you could produce with a few thousand experts rather than tens of thousands worldwide that could drive desire to invest in Civboot. Those would be my three main answers there.
Yeah, I think that's right about what I'm thinking as well. Having something like a university town of maybe 100,000 people,
Mm-hmm.
They have one or two universities. They have laboratories where they can, create and reproduce the technology locally. They're not going to be building 35 fighter jets, but they could do, mini computers. They could do things that control traffic lights, take care of local workers, things that the things that we use microcontrollers now for. The stuff that back in the 70s ran on PDP-11s. The world ran just fine on PDP-11s, and I
Yeah.
think that having local governments, local communities, not shunning modern technology
Right.
for things that are critical, things that you really need to work all the time and be able to fix and not rely on anyone else to have it work, like traffic lights, waste management, personal record, medical stuff. You really need 100% reliability on, and can't, for social reasons, really, can't outsource that sovereignty, that level of technological independence to another party. I think that's super important for keeping some level of sanity as we go on to 2 nanometer node, brain computer interfaces, AI. Uh, if we don't do something about this now, we will end up in a world where we're too gone, it's too far past the pale
Hmm.
to go back and convince people to go back to a simpler time.
Yeah. Yeah, I do worry that
Anyway,
the
well,
technological complexity has already run away from us, or it's close to being fully run away from us. We need to, and the goal of Civboot is to reduce and um, what's the word? Refine, uh, distill. It's to distill the value of technology, the simple pieces that you can build on, things like fundamental algorithms, uh, fundamental CPU architecture, fundamental operating system architecture, distill them, rework them with this new goal, and have like a very simple seed that you can um, learn from and even build from. All seeds will eventually grow in complexity, and that's understood. But we should try and preserve our seeds. Um, that's fundamentally the idea. It's not that Civboot will somehow magically stop complexity. I think it's the nature of all systems to grow in complexity, to thrive in complexity, to decay because of the overload of complexity, and to die. Uh, and when you're lucky, what you really want is for those systems to have children that are even better at adapting than they were. Uh, you want to distill that simplicity, and that's what you see the natural world do. And I think we should try and replicate that as intentionally as we can for a better future for ourselves and our children, and to improve how we understand technology. So that's my personal philosophy.
I agree. I think that's right on point. Yeah, as the complexity increases, so does the system's fragility, its unmaintainability, and we do need to for the stuff that we really need every day to live, not rely on ultra uh, fragile systems, which are so easy to disrupt. We don't want to wake up one day and end up going from, utopia to because someone forgot to update a dependency or something like that. We need to have some level of resilience. And I think in future episodes, if we do this again, we can go into more of the prescriptions. So we've described the problem. Now we can go into uh, what potential solutions might be later.
Yeah, I think if we did want to go into problems, the one that's coming up to me is what if all the AI systems and data centers suddenly shut down? Where would we be? Uh, and like that's not an apocalypse scenario, or it shouldn't be, right? But uh, you might worry that it is, and what could we do to prevent that from being an actual apocalypse scenario? And I think the answer is, well, if you had simple alternatives to those systems, yes, it can be valuable to rely on those systems, but if you need to at least have alternatives. And so maybe we could talk about that.
I agree. I
Yeah.
think this was a great discussion.
Great.
And
Well, thank you so much for
do it
joining me.
again
I
sometime.
appreciate taking the time, and also thanks for pushing it back. I had a lunch with some family, and we didn't schedule it very well, so I appreciate your flexibility.
Yeah, no worries. Anytime. I had fun, and I'll talk to you again some other time.
Sounds good. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Feel free to post questions, and I'll try to answer them either in my live cast or if it's one for Skywit, we can talk about it live some other time. Thank you so much, and join us in Discord. Bye now.